Welcome everyone, ladies and gentlemen, to our ordinary council meeting, 20th of June 2023. As the meeting chair, I give my consent for this ordinary council meeting to be streamed live, recorded and published online. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or make a submission will be recorded, and their voice, image and comments will form part of that live stream and recording. The chair and/or the CEO have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed appropriate. That may include where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. The live stream will stop prior to the closed section of the meeting and will recommence for the conclusion of the meeting. The public is able to view the live stream via our website, www.pyrenees.vic.gov.au. Should technical issues prevent the continuation of the live stream, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum can be maintained, and where possible, a recording of the meeting will be published on Council's website. Where a quorum cannot be maintained, the meeting will be adjourned until the issue is resolved, or the meeting postponed to another time and date in accordance with Council's governance rules. Please stand for the opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask you to give your blessing to this council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the Pyrenees Shire. Amen. Please be seated. We acknowledge the people past and present of the Wadawurrung, Judge Aberrung, Eastern Maar and Watchaballock tribes whose land forms the Pyrenees Shire. We pay our respect to the customs, traditions and stewardship of the land by the elders and the people of these tribes on whose land we meet today. As we're all here, there's no apologies. Any disclosures of interest by councillors or office bearers? None, thank you. Confirmation of the previous minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on 16th of May 2023 and the closed meeting of council held on 16th of May 2023, as previously circulated to councillors, be confirmed. Moved Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Clark. All those in favour? Carried. Are there any business arising? None. Thank you. Members of the community are encouraged to participate in public ordinary council meetings by asking questions or presenting a submission. This can be done by attending in person or by submitting in writing prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting, online through council's website, by mail or hand delivered. If a question or a submission is submitted in writing, this will be read by the chair during public participation, stating the person's name and township. Question time will be held first, followed by public submissions. 30 minutes is allowed for the total period of public participation. Time extension may be allowed at the discretion of the chair, subject to the provision of the governance rules. A person may ask a maximum of 2 questions at any one meeting. The chair will allocate a maximum of 5 minutes for each person who wishes to address council or ask questions. The chair, councillor or council officer to whom the question is referred may immediately answer the question or take the question on notice for answering at a later date. There will be no discussion or debate with public attendees. However, councillors may ask questions of the attendee for clarification. We have one question here from Mr. Trevor Davey of Waterloo. Would you like to pose it, or will I read it? The question is there a clear and concise policy for the Pyrenees Shire in regard to use of containers for general use and or building a container house? Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Davies, for your question. Shipping containers are classifiable structures under the building regulations that were published in 2018 and therefore subject to building permits. Council recognised that shipping containers can provide for temporary storage solutions and has built capacity into our General Local Law 2019 that allows for the short-term use of shipping containers subject to approval. Council's approach to shipping containers is consistently applied and accords with the building regulations and the General Local Law. Further, assessment of permanent shipping container usage considers land use permit triggers identified within the Pyrenees planning scheme. Therefore, they can be used as a container house, subject to building regulations and subject to meeting the planning permit triggers that the Pyrenees planning scheme would be triggered through their use.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Is there anyone who wishes to make a submission? No. Thank you. Councillors, in the agenda we have item 10 with the various recommendations. Item 10.4 is not covered by this vote. So are there any questions on any items up to 10.4? Councillor Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if this one goes to Mr. Nolan or Mr. Gowans. It's simply in relation to item 10.3.4 project update, the Havelock Street toilet redevelopment, and bearing in mind that they are very, very well utilised and popular, not just with locals, but passing traffic. There's quite often coaches and buses stop there. My simple question is, are the works on track and are they to be finished on time? Because the urgency of getting them done for the use. I know we've got portables there, but people refer to use a proper toilet. Are they on track and time to be finished?
Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Farrar, for your question. We understand that there is a fair bit of inconvenience by having the very popular, well-used toilets in the main street closed. Thankfully, the work to date has been progressing well, and we've been updating the public through our notice board, and they are on track for completion by the end of July, and works are progressing well. Like any building project, there are things that you find when you do demolition work, and I think the demolition work did find some issues that absolutely warranted the addressing of the issues that are currently being undertaken.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions to Mr. Gowans. Firstly, the economic development report talks about a 43% uplift in building approvals. Mr. Gowans, do we have any sense about how much of that work is actually happening, or whether there's a bit of a delay? And I'm happy to take that one on notice, given I've just thrown that one at you in the sense of things.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for your question. Look, I might take that on notice. However, we'll only get a building permit if works are effectively going to be immediately underway. So I'm presuming it is a genuine uplift based on the knowledge that I have at this stage, but I'm happy to go and review that and provide any subsequent answer through the minutes if required.
Thank you very much. And the second question, just do you have any update on the Lexington footbridge? The report says in this next month, just in terms of a date, please.
Don't have an exact date, Councillor, for the removal. We're just waiting on some traffic management permits from the crane company. The crane company's been employed to remove it. So it's still imminent in terms of there's a set time frame on when those permits that the Road Authority, the Department of Transport and Planning need to provide them. So right. So the month is probably the worst case scenario. So it works imminent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Councillors, Before us, we have up to 10.3.4. Can I have moved Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Vance? All those in favour? Carried. 10.4, Community Satisfaction Survey. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this item is actually contained in the section of the agenda which deals with items for noting, but in fact it's an item for decision. The purpose of the report is to report to council and the community about the Community Satisfaction Survey report for 2023. So each year the local government Victoria coordinates and auspices a statewide local government community satisfaction survey throughout Victorian local government areas. And the report is provided, has been circulated to councillors and to staff. The outcome of the survey results is that essentially at the time of writing this report, a thorough assessment of the survey results not yet been completed, and there's some general observations that are made about the results, and some of the factors that are influencing the results are contained in the report. Essentially, there has been a continuation of a decline in several areas of service areas when compared with the last 10 years. Overall, there's been a decline across the sector and the small rural council average in most areas measured. Council continues to perform well in waste management when compared with state small rural average. Council's lowest performing areas relate both to sealed and unsealed roads. And there's been a significant decline in elderly support services and overall council direction. Some of the significant events that may have contributed to the results include the major flood event of October and November 22, which impacted on the road network and the appearance of public areas and recreation facilities. The decision of council to exit from home-based aged care services. Financial pressures impacting on council's capacity to deliver services. And an incorrect perception that the highways and arterial roads are part of council's managed road network, requiring some further community education about what roads council manages and what ones council doesn't. Mr. Mayor and councillors, this is always an opportunity for improvement. As a result, there are 4 recommendations in this report. First is that we publish the 2023 Community Satisfaction Survey report on the council website, that we use the results of the survey to reset performance targets for the council plan where appropriate, that council uses the results of the survey to review specific areas for improvement, and specifically in addressing the area that is of most concern to our community, that council undertakes targeted community consultation and engagement in the second half of 2023 on sealed local road management.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Moved Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Clark. Councillor Keogh.
No, just to comment that it is useful to have this data so that we can look at areas that we need to pinpoint and target. So it's it can be very useful. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keogh. Councillor Clark. Any other councillor? Councillors, we have a motion before us. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you, councillors. And we have the councillor activity reports and assembly of councillors. Move Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Ferrari. All those in favour? Carried. Items for decision. Beaufort Lake Caravan Park fees and charges. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek council's endorsement for an increase in fees and charges to clients of the Beaufort Lake Caravan Park. In 2022, Council commissioned and undertook an operational review of the Beaufort Lake Caravan Park, and the report included a variety of recommendations, with a number of these recommendations already having been undertaken, including the completion of a master plan for the caravan park to identify opportunities for improvement and development, the migration of bookings to an online booking service, which has been undertaken, and the development of a new website. The report also identified recommendations for increasing fees, and the body of this report does make some comparisons with other like facilities across our region, and recommends an increase in the fees to ensure that we are keeping up with costs associated with the management of the facility. Specifically, the fees are outlined in the body of the report, and particularly what you have in the report there for powered and unpowered sites, en-suites, cabins, and the like. I do have to actually point out one error in the report, that is for the current charge for powered sites for both is $30, not $25 as reported. And the recommendation is that powered sites be increased from $30 to $35. So with that correction, Mr. Mayor, and in the context of a general increase in the fees in the order of 3.5% in line with current rate cap, there are recommendations for those fees to be increased as outlined in the report. So in summary, the recommendation is that council endorses the proposed increase in rental fees for residential tenants and those who occupy annual sites of 3.5% for 23-24. The council endorses an increase in the fees for unpowered and powered sites as recommended in this report. That is $20 for unpowered and $35 for powered sites. The council receives a further report in September 23, which is to incorporate a review of the fees during peak holiday seasons. The purpose of that is, which was noted in the operational plan that was commissioned, was that many of the light caravan parks actually have differing fees during peak times. And 4, that council undertakes annual reviews of the park's fees and charges at the beginning of the 24 calendar year.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, we have a move, Councillor Vance, seconded Councillor Ferrari. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not essentially a question, it's an observation. And I've got some feedback from the public and also the manager of the caravan park in relation to moving to the online booking system. And my understanding and the feedback I have that's been very well accepted. Not only has it been very well accepted, but it's significantly increased the bookings and interest shown in the caravan park. So I'd just like to congratulate the team that's put that together and made that happen, because it's certainly working, and it's the way of the world. People get online and book stuff now. So really just wanting to say well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Any other? No. Councillors, we have all those in favour? Carried. Asset and Development Services, preferred supplier, tertiary gravels. Mr. Gowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide information to council on the tenders received for the public tendering of contract C2223-011 tertiary gravels, and consideration of their inclusion in the preferred supplier panel for the supply and transportation of tertiary gravels. The tender was closed on the 24th of May this year, with 4 contractors providing a service or product offer. The 4 contractors are all contractors that have been previously used by the council, and there's a range of materials and transportation services offered by each of them listed in the report. A review of the submissions provided by the tenderers showed that all are compliant with the tender requirements. Having a secure and reliable source of appropriate gravel for use on council roads, the core function of road asset management. And this proposed preferred supply panel provides surety for council for the supply of tertiary gravels. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that council accept all the submitting companies to be added to the Pyrenees Shire Council's preferred supplier panel for the supply and delivery of tertiary gravels.
Thank you, Mr. Gowan. Moved councillor Keogh, seconded councillor Clark. Any discussion, councillors? All those in favour? Carried. PA 1988-12A 543 Trarella Road Brewster Amendment to Broiler Farm Permit. Mr. Gowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to consider an amendment to planning permit PA 1988/12 for the expansion of an existing 4,000 bird broiler farm to a 600,000 bird farm with the development of additional agricultural sheds on the subject land at 543 Trarella Road, Trarella. The previous planning permit was issued on the 21st of December 2012. On the 21st of June last year, an application was lodged to amend the planning permit to allow for the development of additional agricultural sheds on the subject land to increase the number of birds to 600,000. The application was advertised and councils received 3 objections. However, 1 objection has been withdrawn. The application has been assessed against the relevant provisions of the Pyrenees planning scheme. The subject site is located 4.8 kilometres southeast of the Trarella township. The site has an overall area of 224 hectares. The surrounding land use includes land in the farming zone used for agricultural purposes, grazing and cropping. The site currently supports an 8-shed intensive broiler farm with a permitted capacity of 400,000 birds. The proposed broiler sheds would be the same size and form as the existing, with a capacity to shelter up to 50,000 birds in each shed. This application relates to the 4 proposed sheds only. The key issues raised in the objections is summarised in the report. However, they include issues such as the expansion of the broiler farm would potentially increase the building exclusion zone around the farm, and residents want certainty that the expansion of the farm will not preclude the potential for them to develop land for dwellings in the future. Other issues included the potential for increase in odour impact. Another one is that the increase in traffic during construction and the relating use would be increased and should be restricted to Trarella Road and not nearby Cayley's Lane as per the requirements of the existing planning permit. And there was also a concern that consideration of any increased runoff to Spring Hill Creek and impact surrounding properties, which also share this water course, could impact the biodiversity of the area. The applicant provided 2 written responses to objector concerns. The written responses were circulated to objectors for consideration. As a result, 1 objection was withdrawn. As detailed in the report, there was an on-site meeting with objectors and the proponent, and the proposal was put forward to the objectors at that point, and there were some benefits to that meeting. However, the 2 objections still remain on the table. The application was referred externally, including to Agriculture Victoria, to the CFA, to the EPA, and they have all provided comments that could be supported if the application was supported, that there's conditions that have been put forward. In terms of the Pyrenees planning scheme, the proposal generally accords with the planning policy framework. The key issues to consider are strategic justification, clause 53.09 specifically relating to poultry farms, amenity impacts, and amendments to conditions of planning permit or the existing planning permit. Is a strategic direction of clause 02.03-3 agriculture of the municipal planning scheme to encourage the continuation of land use for agricultural purposes, including the protection of agriculture and the encouragement of sustainable and diverse agriculture. The agricultural use for the subject land for a broiler farm has been established by the existing planning approval. Given the site's location in the farming zone, it is considered that the site is suitable for use as a broiler farm, and the expansion proposed by the amendment to the relevant planning permit. Existing infrastructure is provided both on the site and in the surrounding context, resulting in sustainable land management and infrastructure provision. The proposal is supported by the planning policy framework at clause 14, agriculture, clause 14.01-2S, sustainable agricultural land use of the Pyrenees planning scheme, where it is policy to facilitate ongoing productivity and investment in high value agriculture, including the establishment and expansion of poultry farms in a manner consistent with the orderly and proper planning and protection of the environment. Both the Environmental Protection Authority and Agriculture Victoria are supportive of the proposal. In relation to development, clause 15.01-6S, designed for rural areas, seeks to ensure that development respects valued areas of rural character. It is considered that the development of 4 more sheds, consistent with the existing sheds association with the broiler farm, are of a siding scale and appearance which protects and enhances the rural character of the site and surrounding farm environs. The visual area and amenity of the area, including road frontages and rural areas surrounding the site, will be maintained by the sympathetic siding of the sheds within an existing cleared area where they will be screened by existing bunding and native vegetation screen planting, which is proposed to be maintained. In summary, the expansion of the use and associated development are considered to provide for a high quality response, which positively contributes to sustainable and diverse agriculture, while ensuring that the visual amenity of the environment is maintained. The proposed expansion of the broiler farm is an acceptable outcome in the context of the farming zone, as it will provide for the ongoing use and expansion of an intensive agricultural land use on land which is designated for agricultural purposes. The proposed siting, design, height and setbacks of the proposed sheds associated with the expansion are consistent with existing buildings and works on the site. Both the existing landscape screening to the site frontages and proposed landscaping required as a condition of approval will seek to address visual amenity to surrounding properties. The impacts of the use of the land and expansion on the surrounding area can be managed through the implementation and ongoing effect of the environmental management plan for the site. The subject land is located within the farming zone as is surrounding land within a 4.5 kilometre radius, including the objector's properties. The principal purpose of the zone is to provide for the use and development for land for agriculture. The use of the land for a broiler farm directly aligns with this. It is noted that non-agricultural uses, including dwellings, should not adversely affect the use of land for agriculture. Concern was raised by residents that the expansion of the broiler farm would increase the building exclusion area around it. Residents want certainty that the expansion of the farm will not preclude the potential for them to develop land for dwellings in the future. There is no building exclusion zone created by the broiler farm under the Victorian Broiler Code 2009, including the 2018 amendments. It is noted that none of the objectors' properties directly adjoin the broiler farm and are over 3 kilometres from the broiler sheds. Residents raised concerns regarding the impact of odour associated with the farm. It is noted that the existing odour issue has not been noted to council, the EPA or the owner manager during the 10-year operation. 2 odour modelling assessments were submitted with the application. These reports were based on much larger broiler farm proposal for Farm A and B, which are no longer proposed. Since these assessments and the introduction of the Victorian Code for Broiler Farms, the broiler industry has required improvements in odour management practices. This includes a reduction in stocking densities, rotary hoeing of floor bedding to keep it dry and odour-free, covering composting of mortalities, no storage of spent litter on the site, and more tunnel ventilated and improved climate controlled boiler sheds, and frequent inspections by the RSPCA. In relation to traffic, condition 22 of the current planning permit requires all heavy vehicles movements to and from the subject site that must only be undertaken via Truro Road to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. Concern was raised about increased runoff to Spring Hill Creek associated with the expansion and the impact of surrounding properties, which also share this watercourse. There is also concern that biodiversity could be impacted if there was associated runoff. Development was originally subject to drainage plans for the existing sheds, where stormwater is currently drained into a dam system. This is set to continue, and a new drainage plan will be required by condition to address any additional stormwater drainage from the proposed sheds. There is currently no runoff from the development into Spring Hill Creek, and this is not proposed to change as part of the expansion. The relevant catchment authority has been consulted, and no concerns have been raised in relation to runoff to the Mount Emu Creek catchment. Therefore, based on this report and the officer's assessment, it is the officer's recommendation that council issue a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit subject to following conditions, including conditions relating to amended plans being required, access construction requirements, drainage requirements, landscaping plans, heavy vehicle route requirements, waste litter management, shed design requirements, erosion prevention measures, litter management, vehicle noise suppression, noise emissions, offensive odour and chemical spray control, and other amenity impacts, just to name a number of the areas that conditions cover.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Moved Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the three things particularly, Mr. Gowans, that I just wanted to follow through, and you've answered two of them in your presentation. Thank you. The first one was the site water, and I see condition 4 effectively allows for a 10 megalitre dam to manage all the site water, and the site water effectively is only the water that runs off the roofs of the buildings, isn't it?
That is correct.
Yeah, thank you. The second one, the truck movement, so that original condition for the original permit in section 13, and also the one in section 28 where the movement's restricted till 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. both follow over from the original permit, so that's good too. Thank you. That's correct. Yeah,
correct. Yep.
And just the final one I've got, I know 11 and 12 talk about landscaping plans, so council has the capacity to ask for landscaping to be done. Has the proponent given us any indication of what they plan to do with the existing blue gum plantation in terms of its longer term use or retention, I suppose, probably the correct word?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. The discussions to date, and it's reflected in the conditions, that it's the intent to retain the existing blue gum plantation. However, we understand that trees do have a life and a value potentially, but the landscaping plan needs to be amended, and we can seek some surety around that immediate buffer zone. Obviously, the whole site provides some benefits, but yeah, I'm not sure it's reasonable to expect that the whole site would never be cleared. However, I do understand that both the visual amenity and the potential benefits of the plantation for odour retention do have some benefits.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kerr.
Sorry, just a couple of quick ones. One of mine was about the Kayleys Lane, just ensuring, just asking processes about that, just to ensure that does happen and it's on the correct route. And my second question, just before I sit down, is also there were some concerns in the objections about affecting building possibilities in other properties, which we're a little bit further away, but just confirming that this project wouldn't affect that.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Keogh, for your questions. In terms of Cayley's Lane, use effectively using East Trawler Road to access Cayley's Lane. It is a gravel road, so there's actually some benefits in using the sealed road network, which goes from the Western Highway all the way to the development. The road has been upgraded. It's marginally longer to come down that route. I think there was a proposal, just to clarify, that it's that northern section of Trawler Road that we're restricting vehicles to, not south of the proposal. So just for clarity purposes, if there's any observed usage, that's something that we can address through monitoring, and if we receive any complaints, and if there is some truck movements, then we would seek from the proponent to inform the transport companies to use the proper route. Now, the second question in terms of property development, it's a reasonable question. There is guidelines on exclusion zones around broiler farms for new dwellings, and the recommendation is that it's a recommendation. I'm not sure it's you have to, but it's recommended that there's an 880 metre buffer, and that has some potential, but in reality that buffer already exists for the existing broiler farm, and it's only the small expansion which would move it by how much those sheds are developed on the site. So that's an existing buffer that's recommended.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? We have a proposal before us. All those in favour? Carried. Local Road and Community Infrastructure Program Phase 4. Mr. Gowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek direction from Council about the projects to be funded under the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program Phase 4. In May this year, the Commonwealth advised of Phase 4 of this program, with Pyrenees allocation being just under $2.2 million, with projects to be delivered by 30th of June 2025. The program guidelines are yet to be published, but are expected to be similar to those of Phase 3. However, the funding from this grant is made up of two components, and that's the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program Part A, which is for general community infrastructure, and that allocation is 1.394921 million. And 4B, which is $804,621, which is road-specific infrastructure. It is proposed that the following principles should apply to the selection of projects, and that council should have regard to asset renewal and contributing to the 10-year asset plan, addressing areas of need. Funding is distributed to different communities and localities within the municipality, addressing projects that council would otherwise struggle to fund, and choosing projects that reduce financial burden on council into the future, and also that council consider funding budget initiatives and pipeline projects that it previously hasn't been able to fund. In the report, there's a list of projects that are presented for council consideration. These include 2 bridge rail renewal projects, some floodway projects in Evansford and Nadiallic, major culvert improvements at Crowlands, some major stormwater works in Avoca in 3 locations, including the Asbury Street extension to the west, High Street median works, and Pound Lane. Sorry, there's a mistake in the table there. Pound Lane drainage. There's also some proposals for curb and channel renewal work in Avoca and also in Beaufort. There's also a project there to improve the resurfacing of netball and tennis courts in the Shire at 4 locations. There's a tree removal project that Council has discussed previously in Snake Valley, and also some streetscape and drainage works in Redbank. Just in terms of location of that first project that I was suggesting where the bridge rail renewal was, that includes one potentially on the Carnham Lake Goldsmith Road and also in McKinley Street, Landsborough. The projects listed in the report provide for community benefit through improvements to infrastructure and amenity. And it's the council, it's the officer recommendation that council endorses the listed projects to be nominated for funding under the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program Phase 4, and the projects are listed there in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Councillors. Moved Councillor Vance, seconded Councillor Keogh. Councillor Vance.
Just a quick question. Various, which town did that happen to? I hope I put you on a spot.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Vance, for your question. You have put me on the spot. However, there is a program that's being undertaken by the Recreation Department at the moment to assess the highest areas of need. So when we say various locations, those locations will be based on need after the report comes in around where the highest need is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Clark.
Just follow on Councillor Vance's comment, as long as various is in the Pyrenees Shire, it won't really matter. That's an important thing in that sense. Mr. Gibbs, I think the only comment I'd like to make is some money is pretty hard got in this council. It's one of the few times we've actually been given some money to work with. And I think when we get to the end of this, most of what you'll see, you won't see. It's all going to be underground. It's going to be curb and channeling and drive past at 60 k's. But that's the important stuff. If we get it wrong, we get a lot of grief as councillors. So I think it's really important that we're doing some of that stuff with this money that we've got.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other discussion, councillors? I'll put the proposal. All those in favour? Carried. Corporate and Community Services. Adoption of 2023-24 budget, 10-year financial plan and revised revenue and rating. Ms. Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report presents to Council the 2023-24 proposed budget, revenue and rating strategy and the 10-year financial plan for consideration and adoption. The Local Government Act 2020 requires Council to prepare a budget for the upcoming financial year and the 3 subsequent financial years, and the budget must be adopted by 30th of June each year. This report also includes detailed information about the rates and charges to be levied and other financial information required by Council to make an informed decision about the adoption of the budget, and includes several long-term strategies to assist Council to consider the budget in a financial management context, including the 10-year financial plan, the revenue and rating plan, a borrowing strategy and the Council plan. Items within budget considerations are included within the report, including taking into account the Victorian government rate cap of 3.5%, latest economic factors to ensure Council's long-term financial sustainability, ensuring the equitable distribution of rates across municipality, and recognition that although Council's overall rate increase is 3.5%, annual property revaluations impact individual rate increases differently. The inclusion of a capital budget that is considered sustainable for the next financial year and future years. Waste management charges which have been increased to cover the cost of the delivery for this service, noting that council is not allowed to profit through those charges. A proposal to increase council's borrowings is included in the budget to borrow $1 million, which will be used for the funding of both at Caravan Park redevelopment and allowance for strategic capital works projects. This will speed up delivery of some works that otherwise could wait years for external funding opportunities to arise. An adjustment to rating differentials is detailed in the revenue and rating plan following receipt of the annual property revaluations. So the most significant of that included in the plan is the reduction of the rating differential for rural or farming properties from the existing this year 70% to 67% of the general rate to ease the impact of the significant increase in valuation of farm properties. Public notice of the proposed budget, financial plan and revenue and rating plan was given in accordance with Council's engagement policy through notice in the Pyrenees Advocate and through Council's website engagement hub, with opportunity provided for members of the public to make submissions. One submission was received that raised valid points regarding the proposed fees and charges schedule, focusing on inconsistencies and increases imposed with regard to venue hire charges, the non-commerciality of printing and copying charges, and some large increases in statutory charges. A response will be provided to the resident this week, but in response, council officers have reversed all proposed increases with regard to venue hire charges and printing and copying charges with a view to conducting a further review of these over the next month in consultation with the regular users, following which a revised schedule of charges will be put forward for council adoption and publication. The changes of those fees and charges are not considered material to the budget as a whole, so it won't require a re-adoption of the budget. So it's a minor change. The statutory charges questioned in the submission will be confirmed to the resident, but these charges reflect government imposed fees and increases. In conclusion, the 2023-24 proposed budget, 10-year financial plan and revenue and rating strategy is presented to council for consideration and adoption. It is considered that these strategic documents enable the council to deliver its essential services and projects in line with the council's vision. And the officer's recommendation is included in full within the report, but I won't, and I'll take it as read because it is fairly lengthy. There is one correction in item 10 of the recommendation that should read $1 million. It's missing a zero. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bramwell. Councillor, we have a recommendation. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Move Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There's always a fair bit of work for council in the context of doing this, and I think there's probably a couple of things I'd like to say about it. The things that we have control over aren't valuations, but we do have control over where we set the rates. And once again, this year we varied our differential rates to recognise that the property movements have been uneven across the Shire and to try and keep that burden relatively even in that sense of things. And that's important. I think it's a bit tricky when you kind of come into next financial year with $600,000 less in actual spending power than what you had the year before. And that's because we only had 2% of rate rise last year and inflation's run 7%. If things go really well this next year, we'll probably come out about another $200,000 behind because we've got 3.5%, but at the moment inflation's still running at 7% and not looking like it's going to tail off till Christmas. So we could easily be 5.5 again this year. So that's pretty, 800,000 is a lot when you've only got a $25 million organisation. It makes a really, really big difference in that sense of things. Some of the other things I think it's noting, I don't think any of us are happy about what we're having to charge you for your waste. And we have cut back some of the transfer hours deliberately to try and reduce that cost, but that is the cost of delivering the service in that sense of things. And in that context, part of that delivering that service is $65 of every tonne, and each of us produce about half a tonne, or each household produces about half a tonne of waste a year. We give $65 of that directly to the government as a tax. Every year we don't get anything for it. Well, we're supposed to get money back, but and occasionally we do, but rarely we do. So that's one of the things where it's not just our hand that's in your pocket, unfortunately, it is also the state government in that sense. So I think it's a very modest budget, but a budget that deals with the things that we need to, which is our roads and our facilities for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrar. Councillor Farrar. Any other councillors?
Just sorry. Yes,
Councillor
thanks, Mr.
Keir.
Mayor. Just echoing that, we have tried to really work on that and hear those submissions and things like taking into account the farmers with valuations, etc. And also, you know, this will be a difficult year, a difficult season for all our farmers, but also all the general ratepayers, businesses still recovering from COVID, and the average householder whose household increases in that are also going to affect them. So I guess just one comment I wanted to make is making sure that we're clear with our information in regards to instalment payments, etc. So to make it as achievable as possible for all our ratepayers in this year that could be quite difficult for many of them.
Thank you, Councillor Keir.
No.
This is probably the most important document we create throughout a year. And we constantly ask our community to talk to us, to let us know what they think we could do better. And this year we've had a group of farmers come in and talk to us. We've had the submission Ms. Bramwell spoke about. It's a total of 4 people. I think we can take the fact that most people either are very happy with what we're doing or are not interested enough to really worry about it. Each year I commend the staff for the work that goes into putting a budget and a 10-year financial plan together for us to provide the community with the services that they want. And again, I commend the staff for that work and thank them. We have a recommendation, councillors. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Chief Executive Officer, Avoca Arts and Gardens Incorporated, request for art acquisition. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So from the most important report that council might receive in a year to the next item, which essentially is about considering a request from the Avoca Arts and Gardens Inc. For council to purchase a painting titled "At the Going Down of the Sun" as a acquisition to council's collection. And those in the gallery will be able to see some of the artwork that forms part of council's collection around the walls of the offices and the chamber and a number of other council buildings. The council collection is highly prized by council, and we have all the collection registered, and it's available online for members of the public to be able to view. And this has been a long tradition of this council to make acquisitions of art from local artists, particularly those pieces of art that depict our local community and aspects of our shire that form part of our history effectively. And it's in that context that the Avoca Arts and Gardens have requested that council purchase a piece of art by Chris Orr, a Maryborough-based artist, who's depicted the work of it's titled "At the Going Down in the Sun." They've indicated that it represents the only painting that they are aware of which has historical pictorial record in perpetuity that will acknowledge the Avoca War Memorial's 100th anniversary. And to that extent, I think the other thing that's worth mentioning in the report is the fact that the Arts and Gardens in Avoca has not been able to have an art show since 2019, principally due to COVID and also the inability to actually gather enough volunteers to be able to sort of run the show when it was able to be run. So in the context of council not having made an acquisition in recent years, There is a recommendation, Mr Mayor, that council purchases the artwork of Chris Orr titled "At Going Down to the Sun" for a purchase price of $990.
Thank you, Mr Nolan. Councillors. Moved Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Ferrari. Any discussion, councillors? Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've never actually seen that picture before. I think it's quite relevant, not only to our veterans and the current serving ADF members, but also our municipality. And I think it's a piece that is not only relevant, but will be everlasting. So I support the purchase.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Any other discussion? All those in favour? Carried. Hang that one in a vote or somewhere. Parliamentary inquiry into local government funding and service delivery, Mr Nolan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to support a submission to be made to the parliamentary inquiry into local government funding and service delivery. In May of this year, the Victorian Legislative Assembly resolved that the House requires the Economy and Infrastructure Committee to inquire into, consider and report by the 30th of June 2024 on local government funding and service delivery in Victoria, including but not limited to the effects of cost shifting from the state, federal governments to local councils in an examination of vertical and horizontal fiscal imbalances. 2, whether local councils are adequately delivering on their core service delivery objectives. 3, the overall revenue structure of local government. 4, whether the existing revenue structure is sustainable and appropriate, or if alternative models of funding would be more sustainable and appropriate. And 5, any other related matters. Council's financial sustainability is a significant risk to be managed, and council is financially vulnerable due to a limited revenue raising capability and the reliance on government grants to deliver core services and for the renewal of its assets. Mr Mayor and councillors, there is an opportunity through the parliamentary inquiry to shine a light on these vulnerabilities and to advocate for a fairer funding model to ensure smaller rural councils are sustainable into the future. In conclusion, council, the recommendation is that council sees this as an opportunity and that council makes a submission to the Economic and Infrastructure Committee inquiry into local government funding and service delivery.
Thank you, Mr Nolan. Councillors, moved Councillor Vance, seconded Councillor Carey. Councillor Vance.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, certainly small rural councils struggle. We have large areas of land and roads to maintain amongst a smaller population than our city counterparts. But what the city counterparts probably, a lot of them do realise, but a lot more don't realise that milk doesn't come out of a carton. It's got to come out of a paddock and it's got to come down a road to get into the carton, along with the food that they eat. And whether they realise it or not, we generate 75% of Victoria's wealth. So rural councils have got to be sustained. We're struggling under economic circumstances at the moment, and I don't want to bag on about it, but for the benefit of all Victorians, the rural sector has got to be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillor Carey.
Thank you. I'd just like to second what Councillor Vance said too. And I think any opportunity that we get to have our voice heard, and particularly by perhaps legislative assemblies that may not really understand if they've not been in those regional areas, then we need to take that opportunity and do it as effectively as we can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely support.
I think we desperately need to make a submission to the parliamentary inquiry. Anytime I ask questions of government members as someone recently said on TV, parliamentarians don't answer the questions. And we keep getting stonewalled on a lot of our sustainability questions, and the future of the Pyrenees Shire certainly is under sustainable pressure at the moment. Well, councillors, all those in favour? Carried. The submission Murray-Darling Basin Plan. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is another report that's brought to Council's attention in your role in advocating to other tiers of government. And in this instance, there is an opportunity through the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. And essentially the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, which was agreed to by all basin governments and made into legislation in 2012. And now, some years after that, there is an opportunity to review that plan. The plan includes two different water recovery targets, one that bridges the gap between historic overuse and a sustainable level of use, and one that embraces or enhances environmental outcomes. And the efforts to bridge the gap and return water for the environment are behind a schedule and may result in shortfalls. And as such, the government has sought to review this and undertake a range of consultation from basin communities, including Pyrenees, which is one of those basin communities. And specifically, they're seeking ideas or concepts that can be considered in what areas ideas provide water recovery or use efficiencies, what are the barriers, challenges and risks to implementing the ideas, and have the ideas been tested or shared. So, Council, one of the projects that Council currently has on its agenda is the North East Pyrenees Pipeline Project. So this is a project that Council is currently working with Grampians Wimmera Mallee Water, along with the Central Goldfields Council and the Northern Grampians Council, to do a feasibility study and a business case for a rural water pipeline, which ultimately may require an investment of some $100 million to implement ultimately. And so obviously the feasibility study and the business case are incredibly important part of that process. But the purpose of the project is to provide long-term water security for those communities and the farming enterprises that rely on water in that part of our Shire. And there are significant benefits that relate directly to the Murray Basin Plan review that's currently underway. And in particular, the opportunity to provide not only socio and economic benefits to our region, to provide enduring environmental outcomes through water saving and the possibility of removal of farm dams and replace them with more efficient use of water, as well as other co-benefits. And so to that extent, the Murray Basin Plan suggests, or this process around consultation suggests that the ideas that will be reviewed as part of this process will review their ability to contribute towards water recovery targets or achieve basin plan flow targets more efficiently, secure value for money, provide enduring and environmental outcomes, and minimise social economic impacts, and provide other co-benefits. Councillors, the opportunity here is to just shine a light on the project that is currently at hand in the Pyrenees Shire and the extent to which that idea, that project, can contribute to the overall targets and objectives of the Murray Basin Plan. Now, specifically, the consultation is not looking at commercial proposals related to direct funding opportunities, but by advocating again for this project, it's sowing the seed for future discussions to be had with government when it comes time to funding. So to that extent, councillors, the recommendation is that council supports a submission to be made to the Murray-Darling Basin Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, we have a recommendation. Moved to Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Clark. Councillor Ferrari? No. Councillor Clark? No. All those in favour? Carried. We have a late item, councillors, item 13.2.4, petition for the northern end of High Street of Oka. Mr. Gowan.
Officers received this letter dated the 12th of June from Sue Allen of Avoca. And the petition contained a number of photos of high street infrastructure and vegetation north of the railway line, predominantly north of Ashbury Street. And the petition contained 7 signatures and stated, we, the undersigned, have concerns about the overgrown state of the northern end of High Street of Avoca. Before council makes a decision on any matter, it should give regard to the governance rules that it adopted last year, which effectively state that unless council determines to consider the item a matter of urgent business, no motion may be made on any petition, joint letter, memorial or other like application until the next council meeting in which it's presented, except that the petition may be received and or potentially referred to one of the executive officers for consideration and response, and that potentially a further report come to council meeting. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that council receives the petition and requests a report to be presented to a future meeting of council on the matter contained in the petition.
Thank you, Mr. Gowan. Councillors.
Happy to move to that effect, Mr.
Councillor
Chair.
Vance, seconded Councillor Ferrari. Any discussion, councillors? All those in favour? Carried. Councillor reports and general business. Councillor Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 19th of May, I had the privilege of attending the MAB State Council meeting. A very intense day, I must have to say. The Mayor had, our fellow councillor, the chair of the MAB, Councillor Clark, had his hands fairly well full most of the day, but it was a very informative meeting. We had more than 100 propositions put forward and got through about 78 of them, I think, at one stage. And it was put to the vote whether we continue on or whether we go home, and the vote was unanimous, go home. So, but well done, Councillor Clark, and the MAB certainly provide a great service for councils throughout Victoria. We also chaired the AGM of the Landsborough Hall Committee. The previous one that I had chaired had 3 people in attendance. This one had about 9. So things are on the improve in the borough as far as the Hall Committee is concerned. I attended along with my fellow councillors Cuppa at Crossroads. It went down well. On the 23rd of May, I partook in the Audit and Risk Committee meeting via Zoom. I was unable to attend that day. And the next day, I had a Rural Council's Zoom meeting also, where we discussed the upcoming summit in Echuca, to be held in Echuca, and also a fair bit of discussion around forward planning. It's highly unlikely that Rural Council of Victoria is going to be funded anymore by the state government. Over the past 4 years, we've had funding, and highly unlikely that that funding is going to be forthcoming after hearing the budget when it came out. And finally, let me announce officially that the Landsborough Larder is going to open tomorrow morning at 8:30. Wow. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know whether you've been following the Landsborough Larder on Facebook and his posts, but he's really put some effort into that whole building. I can tell you the councillors will be pleasantly surprised when you go back and walk past the planter boxes out front and get inside the building. He's completely transversed. It's wonderful. Thank you. That's
Thank
my
you,
lot.
councillor Vance. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last month, I was able to attend the celebration of the man who invented Vegemite, and I think we did mention this last meeting, but just an incredibly joyful event and a significant milestone for Beaufort, really putting Beaufort even more securely on the map. And I'm thoroughly enjoying the book now as I'm reading it, so very well written. I also attended the Lexington Flood Recovery Community Meeting. That was a great opportunity, and I know others that were there, to meet community members and also to learn so much about trauma management and the effects of trauma in so many ways. Also the effects of traumas that can continue for quite some time afterwards and affect communities. And Lexington had been through so much over the past few years. It was a great spot to have it, and we had such great feedback in looking at how we can support communities in the future. Related to emergency risk management too, yesterday we had our first CERA Community Emergency Risk Assessment meeting with the MEMC group and others in the community. So the first set of protocols were dealt with yesterday. That was a lengthy meeting, not as long as the state one, but it was about 4.5 hours, I think, wasn't it, Kathy? But we looked into assessing requirements for emergency situations. So related to the ones we looked at were relating to pandemic, extreme temperatures, and also mass gatherings. So it's really important, as these processes are vital to protecting our communities. And although, again, they can be quite arduous, the meetings, huge thanks to all those emergency organisations representatives who were there and gave so much to the meeting. And we learned a great deal through that meeting as well, and how to improve those services. And also the council representatives who were there, Kathy and the others who gave their time to review this essential documentation. Councillor Vance referred to the community cuppa at Crossroads. We went up the other end just a couple of weeks ago to Glenpatrick, and can I say, if you haven't been to Glenpatrick, my gosh, it's a beautiful part of our shire and just stunning. So I'm definitely taking the kids up there for a camp away at some stage. But that was beautiful, and the two beautiful ladies that represented their community, and I learned so much for myself then, because I hadn't actually been to that reserve, and it's a real true gem. So so that was lovely a couple of weeks ago. And in my patch, what's been quite topical in Snake Valley is the Uniting Church has been looking at selling the Carnham Uniting Church, so which did then create a lot of angst in the community there, and many community members who may not be part of the actual worshipping community there, but have connections to that church, which was gifted to the community many years ago. So that they've had a number of meetings which I've attended, looking at options that may prevent it happening, or looking at other ways that they can protect that resource. It's in sort of still very much initial stages, but there's a lot of people giving a lot of input and a lot of negotiations happening. So we're still looking at options for that at this stage, and it's sort of a watch this space in regards to that, but quite topical in our area at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Tuck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like any rural councillor in Pyrenees or anywhere in rural Victoria, roads has been a highlight for the last month. I did a little bit of stuff with the Weekly Times with my MAV hat on, but of course used a Pyrenees road as an example in that sense of things. My two committees I represent, Council on Central Victoria Greenhouse Alliance and the Highlands Land, both met in this last month as well. And like Councillor Kerr, I also attended the flood recovery meeting at Lexington, which was a really good night. I had constituent matters in Evansford, in Beaufort, in Warburg, Glenbrae, and also in Lexington to go to, which has been really useful. Again, budgets. So again, putting my maybe hat on a bit, we've had a state budget and a federal budget since we last met. In that sense of things, both of them were quite benign in an operational sense, but quite significant in a capital sense. And that will be an issue for us as council going forward, because that capital money is the money where we can provide for community, provide projects in community, and some of the drainage works we've talked about tonight can be done. I also done some more stories on aged care. Again, and using the Pyrenees example, of course, because we're exiting from aged care in the next couple of weeks. I was in Canberra last week with you, Mr. Mayor, and the CEO, which was really good in that sense. And I'd also just like to comment on Glen Patrick. Joan, who we met at Glen Patrick, I actually was launching the Older Not Alone campaign in Melbourne the next day, which is a campaign about using the existing resources for older people to support them and do what they do. And I actually used Joan's example at 97 of living the great life she is in Glen Patrick. But to circle back to roads, just to finish, you might see me out looking at a lot of roads in the Pyrenees Shire at the moment. I am doing that. But the real reason I'm out is I'm with my 17-year-old daughter teaching her to drive. So if you do see me, just give me a bit of fair birth.
Fair. I hope she's watching.
She's watching and talking.
Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Had the councillor briefing sessions and the cuppa and chat at Crossroads, and again also went out to Glen Patrick. It's such a lovely little spot out there, albeit it was a bit cold, but and we did have a couple of people. The soup was nice, but it is a great little spot out there. And I also one day would hope to get over there and set up the band and have a camp there for a couple of days. Had some constituent meetings and some matters, and ironically, most of those related to roads. That's not unusual, as Councillor Clark alluded to, and as Mr. Nolan alluded to in our community satisfaction survey. It's a constant thing with out in the country's roads, and when we've got a couple of thousand k's of roads, it's always going to be high on the agenda, high on the discussion list, so which is fine. Some meetings at the Beaufort Secondary College, they continue to impress me with their work up there, and they're not just teachers, they're actually really highly engaged with the students, and they've got a genuine commitment to see those students progress and be educated properly. So they just continue to impress me up there, and I'm sure Councillor Keogh would agree with that as well. Discussions with the Beaufort Cricket Club re the building of the new nets. It's progressing, albeit granted the weather hasn't been necessarily kind for progress in that. When you've got a hole dug and it fills with water, it's hard to get much done. But anyway, progress is happening, and I think we'll be pretty much on time for them to be finished. And some meetings with Community House about some projects around the town. That's about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Yes, I attended the Man Who Invented Vegemite, and it was a lovely event, well attended, which I think just helps add to Beaufort and the Vegemite Museum. Went to Parliament House early in May, met with 3 ministers. It's always nice to be heard. We'll see if anything comes of those visits, but we're in there punching and seeing what we can come up with. Flood recovery meeting in Lexington was very good. It's amazing how, if you are not involved in some of these emergencies that occur, you wonder why people have a problem. It's only when you sit down and listen to the experts that these problems can last for years and years. So it's eye-opening to understand more the mental health elements that can come from floods or fires or any of those sorts of issues. Went to the PCC community meal a couple of weeks ago over here in Beaufort, and it was a wonderful event attended by seniors from all around the Shire. They either come in on their own devices or brought in with a bus, and a lovely meal was provided. And again, it's the sort of thing we do for seniors in the Shire and something that we hope will continue under the new providers with which will support our local community. Getting back to last week, we were in Canberra together and just mentioned to Councillor Clark that we got through all items on the agenda, so MOV might have to lift their game a little bit. But yes, it was an interesting couple of days up there in Canberra. Got to talk to some of the pollies up there as well. They were far more interested in other matters than talking to councils, but at least we got a word with a few of them. And hopefully something might come of that as well. So, councillors and members of the public, we have come to the closure of the meeting to members of the public. Pursuant to provision section 4.1.1c of Council's governance rules and section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider confidential items. They relate to purchases of vehicles, rating matter and tenders. So can I have a mover? Moved Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Keogh. All those in favour? I'd like to thank all members viewing on the live stream, all members who attended the council meeting for coming along. Thank you very much for your attendance and please be careful going home. And those viewing the stream, thank you very much for watching and we'll see you next time. Close. No, let's not close the meeting. Let's just close.